Hi guys, thank you for joining us today, and I'm very happy to share with you that as we are recording this video, we actually have reached our 1,000 subscribers! Yay! Thanks to all of you guys who have subscribed to our channel. So continue to share our channel with your friends so they can also enjoy the videos that we make in this channel. Okay, so another reason to celebrate is that I have finally been able to resurrect my fried PC, which I shared to you like a couple of months ago. I only got all the replacement parts back just a few weeks ago, and I was finally able to put it back together, and I would like to share with you guys that experience and that step-by-step guide on resurrecting this fried PC. So let me show you how we turn this PC from dead to life. Let's go! So here we have the remains of our PC. As you can see, all the major components are missing, and we still need to apply new thermal paste on our AIO so that it will effectively cool our CPU. And we have lost a lot of parts, major parts in this PC, and as you can see, we only have pretty much the case and the fans and all the cables. We're missing the GPU here, and we're also missing the whole motherboard. So we need to place that as well as the power supply at the back. So before we start, let's see all the components that we are replacing here in this build. So here we have our new power supply that was sent to us by Thermaltake. So they replaced the whole thing with a new power supply. So I'll just bring my tools over here and let's do a quick unboxing of this power supply that we have received back from Thermaltake. It is always good to have in handy a set of tools that we can use in our PC so that we can have the right tools when we need to repair our PC. So out of the box, we can see that it is totally new power supply. So we have the paperwork, we have the main power supply here. And like what I said in my original video of this, I really like how Thermaltake has packaged this power supply. So that's it for our power supply that we will need to place in our build. Next up is our GPU. So for the GPU, they sent us a replacement GPU. So primarily there is nothing wrong with the GPU that we had. It's just that we don't have any lights on the ARGB fans. So that's why I sent it back, and we have received it after a month and a half if I'm not mistaken. So that's our GPU. And last but not the least, we have received back our replacement motherboard. So funny thing is that this motherboard, we sent it back because we know that it didn't have any power, but on the status report, as you can see here, is that they said that it is because of bent pins. So I am not sure. I didn't even change the CPU while all this time after building it the first time, so I'm not sure why it says there that it's because of bent pins, and it took a lot longer time for it to manifest the issue if it is because of bent pins. But here we have our repaired motherboard. So yeah, this is not a replaced one. They didn't replace it with anything new. Same serial number, I checked. So this is our repaired motherboard. So we will start with this, and we will use this as the base to start rebuilding our fried PC. So carefully remove and place your motherboard on top of the cover or the plastic anti-static cover that they have given you. That one is quite important so that we will not fry any parts of our motherboard, especially on the back side of it. As usual, we will start with placing the CPU first, and then the NVMe for our memory, and then we will put our RAMs. And lastly, once we have put it into the case, we will place our GPU. So here is our CPU. So let's place our old CPU here, back here in our motherboard. So the CPU is covered with thermal paste from the last installation, but we have cleaned it up with alcohol and some cotton. So let's make sure that we align the arrows on the top left side of our CPU to the top left side of the pattern in our motherboard. I'm having a little bit of hard time removing this cover. I'm not sure how they put it in, but yep, here we go. So again, we need to make sure that all the pins are not bent. So we need to place, as you can see here, there's an arrow here and there's an arrow there. Quite small arrow, but it's there. So we need to align those two portions and place our CPU carefully so that we will not bend any pins in our motherboard. Once we have placed that and we know that it's secured, we can close it up and lock it in place. Just making sure that everything is okay before I lock it up. And don't want to mess things up with our CPU. There we go. Okay, so later on we will need to put thermal paste there, but I will do that later when we are already putting it inside our CPU. So this is the thermal paste that I will use, Hydronaut thermal paste for our CPU. So it's I think it's a one-time use. So let's see later. So that's it for our CPU. Let me remove this packaging and cover for our CPU. It may be useful next time. So with the CPU out of the way, so now let's proceed in installing our RAM. So we have a 32 GB, 16 GB dual stick of 6000 megahertz RAM from T-Force. Yep, so we just need to make sure that we put both of the RAMs in the correct channels. So if you want to use channel A, use channel A for both. If you want to use channel B, use channel B for both. So there is a slit in the middle, so we need to align that in our motherboard. So don't just jam it in, you might wrongfully insert it and it may damage your RAM. So RAM is actually one of the more robust parts of your CPU, but if you place it wrong and you mess up the pins, yeah, that's the one of the only things, if I might say so, that may have an effect on your RAM. But RAMs are typically one of the longest living part of your PC. So once you know that it's aligned, you can push it in. Make sure you hear that click. Okay, now we're done with our RAM. Next up, we'll need to install our storage or our NVMe, our main storage. Next, we have our main storage, 2 terabyte storage from T-Force as well. So this will power up our OS and the rest of our file system. So this one, we need some tools in order to install it right here. So let's do that now. So we need our Phillips screw. So I really like using this tool that we have right here. So we have a lot of choices for the bits to use, and it's magnetic, so it really helps my chubby fingers that are very hard to be used in tight and small spaces. So if you like to check out this tool as well, so I'll leave a link in the description below. So here we are. Let's remove the cover carefully. So for this one, these screws are not removable, so it's part of the cover itself. So let's be able to remove this. Yep. So see, they not even changed the thermal sticker. They should have given us new thermal sticker for this. Okay, so let's install our NVMe storage carefully. Don't want to mix up that slot. So once it's inserted, there is a lock here to lock it in place. Make sure it's locked. Okay. Then we can place the cover for our NVMe and screw it back in. Tight but not too tight. So once we have installed it in our PC case, that's the time that we need to put our power cables up here and over here. So let's do that, and let's bring this over and install it in our PC case. So let's remove this first, and I'll bring over the PC case over here on the table. So here we have our PC case. So let's just remove all the cables that are dangling around, because we don't want them to sit behind our motherboard. So let's remove all of those things first away from the stand for our motherboard in our PC case. So the power cable as well, so let's remove that away from the stand so that it will not be stuck behind our motherboard when you place it. So once we are ready, let's do it, and let's place our motherboard inside this PC case. So before I forget, I did remember that we need to remove this old brackets in our motherboard. So these brackets are used if you are using a standard fan, but if you're using an AIO, your AIO most likely will have its own bracket to be used to hold the AIO pump firmly in place on top of our CPU. So let me remove this screws for this bracket, and we will replace it with the ones that are included in our AIO. If you want to see the installation of the AIO itself, you can use the video of our first time building this PC. I will leave the link of that video on the top right corner if you're interested. So now let's place all the stands for our AIO pump. Again, carefully because big fingers, tight spaces literally don't mix. Yep, see the struggle of making those fit. Okay, so once we're ready and we have placed all the stands for our AIO pump, now we can securely screw in our motherboard in place in our CPU. So let's get all the screws that we need in order to screw this motherboard. So again, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 screws. So as you can see, big fingers, it will not fit. So very good tool for me is this magnetic screwdriver, where I can just magnetically insert the screws there using the screwdriver itself. So we need to make sure that we safely secure our motherboard in a crisscross pattern so as to balance the load, the tightness of each part. So as you can see here, I started with the left top right corner and then to the bottom right, and I'm doing the bottom part now. So all of these screws are being placed without screwing it too tightly. Okay. Afterwards, we will screw them tightly and slowly once we have placed all the screws in its place. I think it would be easier if I remove that little screen there first, but anyway, I got too lazy, so let's just do away with it. Once we have placed all the screws in, now we can safely tighten them in the crisscross pattern that I mentioned before. So, doing the left top portion first. Not too tight, but tight enough. Let me try to use a different bit here, see if it will have a nicer fit. Okay, that's better. Okay, so tighten those two. Then we go here on the lower left portion and then go to the upper right portion. Top, then bottom. See the pattern, right? This is to make sure that the load is balanced while we are tightly screwing our motherboard in our case. Once all of those screws are in, now we can start placing our cables in its rightful places. So we'll start off with the power for our motherboard. it is really hard to reach places with my big fingers, so having these kinds of tools like this tweezer is very helpful to get all those cables. And these tweezers will also help me to properly secure these cables once we install it or once we plug it in to our motherboard. So we have one 8-pin and one 4-pin for our power supply and our motherboard in itself. Okay, so you need to make sure that it's tightly pushed in. Okay, so the tweezers help to push it in. Okay, once that's done, we'll do the rest of our cables to power up the rest of the components in our motherboard. So this is the 2480X pin cable for our motherboard. Then next, we will now install our AIO pump to our CPU and our motherboard. So we need to make sure that we align it properly first before we try to install any thermal paste, so that we will not have any problems later on. So make sure that the cables on the pump are not being forced in any way, because it will have an effect on your cooling. So once you have that proper placement and you have decided on how to properly place it, then we can install our thermal paste. So this is also the first time that I'll be using a thermal paste, so please bear with me as I place this thermal paste in our CPU. It will not be perfect, I'm telling you, but as long as we are able to cover the whole surface of our CPU, I think we'll be okay. Why is this the first time? It's because when we first installed this PC, you can also see it in the previous video that I have posted in. Actually, the AIO pump already has some pre-installed thermal paste, so I didn't need to use any or manually put any thermal paste on my CPU. Okay, so we have here our thermal paste and our spatula to be able to spread the thermal paste on the whole portion of our CPU. So let's open this up and let's inject our thermal paste on the center of our CPU. Then we will use the spatula to spread it. So I'm uncertain if I need to put everything. So let's see if that's enough. Let's now use the spatula to evenly, as much as possible, spread that thermal paste on top of our CPU. Just make sure that we can do this as evenly as possible. To cover up as much space as possible on top, because this will help to dissipate the heat of our CPU evenly into our AIO pump. sure all the corners been thoroughly included in our pasting. So once we are satisfied, I think that's okay. What do you guys think? What do you guys think? Did I do a good enough job in placing this thermal paste as my first time? Wait, I think I missed some parts. Let's see. One more. Make sure all the corners are covered. What do you guys think? Did I do a good job in putting thermal paste? Please comment down in the comment section below. Don't be too harsh, okay? It's my first time. So now that we have installed our thermal paste, it's now time to place our AIO pump on top of our CPU. So again, we need to be careful and we need to ready our screws. Make sure that we remember how we want to place our AIO pump. So carefully on top of our CPU. Make sure all the screws are aligned to the stand. Once we are happy with it, we can screw it in place carefully. Especially for those of us who has big fingers, we need to be careful on these things because we might lose our screws. And it will be quite hard to get it out of those tight spaces. So once we have placed all the 4 screws, we can actually tighten it up. Just enough, not too tight. Again, it would be good to do it on a crisscross pattern to make sure that the balance, the tightness when we tied it up, it's balanced on all sides. Once that's done, we can start to fix our cabling and install our AIO pump to the AIO pump pin in our motherboard. So let me go in there and place this. This will be a tight fit, but let's see. You see there? There's the pin. So I need to go in there and make sure that I'll be able to slot this in properly. There's only one way to slot it in, so we need to make sure that we slot it in correctly. Okay, so once that is slot in, we can fix the cabling later. Okay, but we also need to place all the fans. Okay, so there's another slot here for fans. So all my fans are controlled in the control hub that is behind the CPU, and this is the main the main cable to install it in our motherboard. So once we install this, it will control all the other fans inside our CPU. So I am struggling a bit in installing this fan, it doesn't seem to quite go in as I would like. So let's go ahead and plug in all the other cables first. I'll get back to this. Okay, so we have our SATA drives. So let's install or plug in all our SATA drives. If you don't use any SATA drives behind, then you don't need to plug this in actually. So, but I have two hard disks behind, so I'm using this as some of my backup for files. So I'm using this SATA drives for those hard disk. Then let's install our USB 3.1 for the front of our CPU. Next will be our USB-C, which is also in front of our CPU. Then we'll install the front panel controls. Careful, as this needs to be placed properly. Make sure that you have a lot of patience in putting this. So good thing that in my case, the PC case, they have already bundled together for the front panels. Okay, next we have this USB 3 for our small screen here that we are using to check our for display for our PC temperatures and our GPU temperatures as well. Then we have our ARGB controller. We need to install right there. This one is our ARGB for all the lights in our PC case, for our fans, and even for the AIO pump ARGB. Then lastly, on this portion, we have our audio. So our audio cables, we are installing it for our front panel audio cable as well. So once all of those are properly connected, let me try again to install this controller fan into our motherboard. Hopefully I can do this right. Let's try to find another slot now. Nah. Let's properly place it in the correct slot. I don't want to use another fan slot just for this. I know I did it before, so I know it works. So I just need to make sure that we can install it properly. Okay, there we go. Once we have installed all our cables, let's now place our cover for our AIO pump. So it's just magnetic, so it just slots in like that. Then we can clear up some of the other cables that are dangling to make our setup cleaner. Okay, so now that you have done that, we still have one cable here that is not plugged in. That is for our GPU. So now it's time to place our GPU inside our PC. So here we have our replacement GPU. So they have actually changed the GPU in itself. And we need to make sure that we will be able to slot it in properly But before that, let's remove all the stickers so that it will not have any effects when the GPU gets hot. So make sure that we remove all of those stickers in front. There are stickers as well at the back, so we need to make sure that we remove all of those stickers. So once we have removed all the stickers, oh, see, I almost forgot the back portion sticker. Oh, it's there. So once we have removed all the stickers, double check. Okay, we don't have any more stickers. So we can now safely slot this into our GPU slot. So carefully align it to the slot. And make sure you hear that click, okay, once you push it in. So once you have and you heard that click, means you have already installed properly your GPU. So to support our GPU, because it's quite heavy, we need to screw it on the sides. Let me get my screw and the screwdriver. If I use my fingers here, you can actually thumb screw this, but it's because I have big fingers, it really doesn't fit my fingers with this tight spaces. So we'll use 2 screws to make sure that our GPU will not sag. And once we're done with that, we can plug in our power for our GPU. Make sure we have enough space for our cables. Pull it up. We can fix that later. So as you can see, I am using extension cables for my build. This cable for the 24ATX and for this GPU, I'm using some RGB cables that makes it a little bit more interesting with more lights in our PC case. So carefully place all those pins and push it in. I think extension cables are nice as well because you can properly place all your pins or your cables at the front without messing the back, if I might say so. You'll see later when we go to the back of our PC case. So once we have correctly installed the power supply for our GPU, let's just make sure that our cabling is a bit nicer in front before we head back to the back side of our PC case to install our power supply and the rest of our cables to power up our PC. So now coming to the back side of our CPU, let's install our power supply. So as you can see here, like what I told you, since I am using extension cables, so I've already prepared all the cables and installed it in front, and the other end of those extension cables are just waiting to be plugged in to our cables for our power supply. So let's just make sure that we have and know where is everything, so that it will be easier for us as well for our cable management later. Okay, so this is for our SATA drives here. So let's connect those. There's two SATA. I have two hard disks there. Small hard disks just for some backup. So let's install that. Okay, and we can also try and see how we can install our power for our SATA as well. So a little bit of cable management. So make sure that we have the cables properly connected to our drives. Why is it not? Okay, there. Oh. What's the problem? Try again. One more time. Okay, there we go. And the next one. There we go. Okay, so all our hard disks are safely connected. Here's our 24-pin ATX. And this is for our Wi-Fi. So let's reroute this so that we can actually plug it into our motherboard since it's already there. Just to make our cabling a little nicer. Okay, so let's install that Wi-Fi antenna. And tuck away some of the other cables. Okay, so now I think we are ready to place our power supply. Let me get our power supply here. So here is our 850 watts power supply from Thermaltake. Okay. So we need to make sure that we have all the cables ready for this. So let's do this now before installing this and placing it inside our CPU case. So we need our 24-pin ATX. Okay, so let's plug this in our CPU first, and then to our extension cable. Okay, so our 24 pin, once it's plugged into our power supply, we can just safely plug this into our extension cable. Okay. Then we will do our power supply for our Then we will do our power cable for our motherboard. Oops, since this is here, let's just plug in our cable for our SATA drives first, our hard disks. Then we can include this cable for our CPU. I need one more. Okay. Let's place it here, but there will be enough space. Okay, so this is for our 8-pin motherboard power cable. So let's find the other end of that extension cable. Okay. Why doesn't it go in? Let's see. Am I doing something wrong? Oh, there we go. Okay. Then another slot for the other end of our extension cable. So there we go. That's for our motherboard. And then we need to have another 2 for our GPU. Okay, so for GPU, I wanted to use 2. Okay, and another tip, if you see on your cables, right, if there's a component of C, that one is the one that goes into the power supply end, and the other end will be for your motherboard or GPU or whichever part of your PC that you need to do. So the C is the one that is connected to your power supply itself. So before placing the cable for our GPU, let's install this power supply in our case. So we need to make sure that the fan is facing outside, okay, so that it will push air out from our PC case. If we place it on the other side, it will blow all the hot air coming from this PSU to our motherboard, which is not good. So once we are ready, we can install and screw in our PSU in its place inside our PC case. Once that's done, let's find our cable for our extension cable for our GPU, and let's place all those cables correctly. Okay, that's one, and there's another one. Okay, now that's done. Before we even try to clean this up, let's make sure that it's working first. Okay. Let's try to turn on this PC first, because I don't want to do the cable management and then it will not work. So I need to redo and remove everything else again. Okay, so let's plug this in and see if it works. Are you guys ready? Let's turn on the PC. Hey, there we go. It looks like everything is working. Let's just see if it will power up the screen as well. So my only concern is that since there is a fix that is done on the motherboard, may have corrupted some of the drivers, or the OS will not work. Hopefully that is not the case. But of course, I mean, nothing we can do if that is the case. But I am hoping that I will not do anything. Yes, the power on the screen is there. We can see it's loading. Come on. Come on, OS, load up. Hey, there we go. Okay, looks like everything is still working. So we have our power, we have our lights. So we have everything working as properly. So our OS is still installed. All our applications are still installed. My Surfshark is still powering up. And let's see all my files. Okay, all my files looks like it's still all there. Nice. I call this a success, guys. What do you think? Nice. So we have all the lights on all the fans now for our GPU. So that's nice. And we have all the lights on all the other places in our CPU case as well. So, what do you think? Easy enough, right? As long as you have the right tools and you have the right parts, resurrecting a PC is pretty much like starting from scratch. And if you want to watch the video on how I first built this PC, I will leave the link up here. So thank you guys for watching, and again, thank you for all the subscribers who have subscribed to our channel. And if you're one of those who haven't subscribed yet, well, here's your chance. Click that button over there to subscribe and maybe watch one or two of more of our videos here in this channel. I hope you enjoyed your time here as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you, so I'll see you in the next one. Bye!